Bill, really glad to have you back on the show. As you know, we invited you expressly because you are the reputation management guru, and here we are in a series of crises. And we really want to hear how you're working with clients, helping them navigate that. So for those in the audience that do not know you, will you give them a little background and then tell them what you do, and then we're going to dive right in.
Sure. My name's Bill Coletti, and I'm the founder of a firm called Kith. And we're a crisis communications and reputation management firm, exclusively working with companies nowadays when companies are experiencing crisis, but we also work with them long term as they try to grow and expand their reputations.
So it sounds like in this environment where we have stock market crashing, we have this COVID situation going on globally. What's going on with you? How are people working in this crisis management mode, and particularly to protect their reputation?
Yeah. So it's two ways. Just sort of let's just describe the past 14 days. That's when there's sort of been critical mass, if you will. A lot of clients have some sort of crisis management team or crisis management organization, a subset of operations, legal, communications, and executive, or some grouping of people that come together. I'm either a participant on those calls and kind of an equal partner offering perspective from a reputation standpoint in those calls. There's also a model of where we're working with clients where it's really just myself and one of those principals, just the head of communications, the general counsel, or like a chief of staff, sort of just talking about agenda setting for what we need to talk about on that crisis management, sort of whatever caucus or whatever group they pull together. So it's two forms: a lot of one-on-one counseling, coaching, conversations, strategy, but then a lot of just group conference calls as we're all just trying to figure out, what to do next for each individual company or individual situation.
So a lot of what you deal with is communications. And one of the things that I was just talking with a client this morning about this, because they weren't really communicating with their clients about what they're doing or what thoughts are or whatever. What are you recommending companies do in regards to communicating either publicly or with clients or with employees, with anybody?
Yeah. First of all, do it. You got to say something. At a minimum, let's say you're a small lumber yard in Des Moines, Iowa, okay, and you got 10 employees. You are a very, very important leader to those 10 employees, and you have to say something. We're all trying to find sources of truth. And so simply pointing people to the CDC or pointing people to the practices that you want those 10 employees to undertake, wash their hands, how we're going to manage the lunchroom. Or if you're a global enterprise and you're trying to figure out the implications that this has on supply chain, your employees. So the bottom line is you have to say something. Nobody wants to hear from a 10-person, lumberyard in Des Moines, Iowa on Twitter or LinkedIn. That's really focused on the employees and their customers and really very focused communications. Market leaders, so use Abercrombie and Fitch. It's a retail store. They've got stores in China, stores in Asia. What they do is important. And a lot of people, that probably needs to be more broadcast. So at a minimum, say something, show empathy, show concern, show care, be true to who you are, and then keep it up. It's not a one and done, because this is a dynamic situation where truth is evolving or growing, if you will. So I think it's you got to get in the game and you got to keep talking.
So I think a big thing here, we're not 5 minutes into the podcast and twice you've used the word truth.
Yeah.
And it in this hysteria here, I live in Roseville, California, just northeast of Sacramento. And yesterday in the first hour, Costco sold out of toilet paper.
Totally.
And I mean, it's just like, what is going on? So talk to us a little bit about this truth piece. I like the fact you recommended the CDC website. I was on yesterday, I think, and one of the ones I liked was John Hopkins.
Yeah,
they kind of went through a real, I don't want to say bland because it makes it sound boring, but it was like, here are the facts. Boom, 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 boom. Talk to us a little bit about that, where we might find truth, what we have to watch out for out there, because there's people on in all flavors.
Yeah, one of the things I'm cautious of is that I am not infectious disease immunologist expert. I come to crises somewhat agnostic of the crises, of what the topic may be. There are some things that happen more often than others. This is one that does not happen very often. But your point about truth is that we can't spin the facts. The facts are the facts. The facts are that more people are going to get sick tomorrow than there were today, and we're not going to spin. And I think there's no reason to lay blame, but I think our early response as a country and our national leadership was that we could kind of spin our way out of this. And I think I don't want to go down that path, but I think it would be an instinct of a corporate leader to say, well, we're just going to monitor the situation, but we're not going to close anything. And we don't really think it's going to impact quarterly returns. The truth is, if you had been a careful, thoughtful observer and followed the science, that of course this is going to impact sales. This is going to impact your employees. And there's really no way to spin or deny. And so I think another word you commented on the last time we spoke was about the authenticity. Is companies just have to be, which is a nice adjacency to truth, is that I don't know how this is going to impact our company, but what I do know is employees, here's what I want you to do, or here's what I want you to know. And that's okay. That's okay. We don't have to spin the truth. And so let's take it out of COVID for a second. If we have an industrial accident and something blows up and someone gets hurt, companies just have to say, we are working on it, we're solving it, and we're going to get back to normal as fast as we can. And then acknowledge the human cost, because too often corporations forget that there are yous and me's with kids and families and parents and partners that we're all curious, if not scared and confused. And that's one of the things I try to do with clients is just say, there are real people hearing what you say. The world may not need to know about a lumberyard in Des Moines, Iowa, but all 10 of your employees and probably their 20 dependents, they all probably want to hear from you. So say something.
Yeah. And before we jumped on live, you mentioned cadence, and I think this is so important. I really want to hear your perspective on it because you use the term "it's not one and done." This communication piece. Talk to us about what you would recommend about, maybe how often or what the cadence should be in the communication.
Well, it's not remarkably strategically insightful, but this is going to have a beginning and a middle and an end. And so it's not the richest strategy you've ever heard, but it's going to have a beginning, middle, and end. For most companies, the beginning is an initial statement that they make. The initial statement that companies, there's a recipe, it's pretty formulaic of what they need to say. But one of the things they need to say in the NBA, let's just use the NBA as an example on what they did yesterday. We're going to cancel all games for 3 weeks, and we're going to update you, and we're going to reevaluate it 3 weeks. And so for just my little local church, it's a relatively large church, we sent out an email yesterday, and that's exactly what we said. We're cutting back on services, and we're just sort of helping, and we're doing, in 3 weeks, we're going to reevaluate. Doing that is the first step to getting cadence right. Your initial messaging, whether it's this issue or something else, another type of crisis or critical moment, in your first messaging, say, and we are going to provide an update every 30 minutes. This doesn't warrant that, but an industrial accident might. We're going to update every 24 hours. Follow our Twitter channel. Follow us on Facebook. We're going to keep you up to date, because too many companies get in, say what they're going to say, and then they go dark and they don't hear. And that's not good. And then that's not good because it creates a vacuum for people. So even if you don't have anything remarkably new to say, just let everyone know we're on top of it. We're thinking about it. We're researching it. Here's something new that we've learned. That cadence, to your specific point, is set up in that first messaging that you sent out. And it'll just feel right for organizations. I can't give you a recipe that it's every 24 hours, it's every 3 or 4 days. It's just when you feel like people need to hear from you. And I think 3 to 4 days in these early days are really what's right. But the message that I want you and others to know is that it's not one and done. There's a second, third, fourth, and fifth, however many chapters to tell this story. And you don't have to be an expert. You can just say, I care, and keep washing your hands. And there's nothing wrong with repeating a really good message.
Yeah. And if I'm hearing you correctly, there's part of the message that's specific. Here's what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But there's part of the message where you give yourself flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know everything. We're going to be back to you. And then you make certain you follow up and follow through on that schedule. Because if you blow that, then that's another thing. You get people uneasy.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So and that goes to authenticity. If you say you're going to keep people updated, keep people updated. And if you say you're going to reevaluate in 3 weeks, like on day 19 or 20, you should say, we're going to come out with what we believe on day 21, whatever that cadence is. We make this overly complex, and we forget as companies that people care. They care. The lumberyard. I keep on picking on this poor guy in Des Moines, Iowa, but their 10 employees, or if you're a consulting firm with 6 employees, I would rather be that source of truth. Or you're a mom and dad with a family of 4. It's the same logic prevails that we need to communicate. Tailor it internally, external, shareholders. That's when you can kind of get sophisticated with stakeholder mapping. But the fundamental premise of you've got a responsibility to say something, and so do it, and do it the right way.
Yeah. And I think also I want to go back. You mentioned people reacting, and we've got people overreacting, underreacting. And I think it's difficult for a lot of leaders to step back and say, okay, let me remove the emotion from this situation. What am I really facing? Particularly people like ourselves. I think I'm older than you, Bill, but who've been through a few decades, and we've seen different crises happen.
Mm-hmm.
And possibly we've reacted too quickly at times or too slowly at times. But to take that step back and say, okay, how's this really going to affect us? And when do I need to start communicating, and what do I need to say? Am I understanding you correctly?
You are. It's perfect. And if you want to add so that's exactly correct. If you want to add a layer of sophistication, let's think about risk in a framework. Okay. So what we're dealing with right now is an external risk. And so I subscribe to a framework that we've created that there's basically 3 types of risks. There's strategic risks. I meant to raise my prices. I meant to close a factory. I meant to lay off people. I did that for superior economic benefit. So it's a strategic risk. A preventable risk is metal in meat shavings. And I think we talked about this, is that's a preventable risk. You simply should not have metal in the ground beef that you're making. This is an external risk today. All right. And so the way we communicate about an external risk, be in the herd. You don't need to be an outlier. You need to just stay within your lane, communicate to the people that matter most to you, and stay really, really focused on that. So when we think about risk, all 3 of those, strategic, preventable, and external, all 3 of those have a different means of communication, because all 3 of them, the public, your audience that you're talking to, perceives the risk differently. We all get a lot of benefit of the doubt on these external risks, all right, because it's happening to everybody. We're all equally confused. And if there's a hurricane or a force majeure weather type event similar to this, we're all in it together. So there's a lot of slack, strategic, preventable, different paradigms.
Yeah, but I can't help but think when you say stay in my lane, I'm thinking it's a storm. I'm on the Golden Gate Bridge and it's blowing and it's coming down, and the person next to me is on their cell phone, and another person next to me is looking at their hair and doing some makeup or whatever as they're driving. So I have to stay in my lane and not let these other people throw me off, like the people who bought all the toilet paper yesterday at Costco.
Control what you can control.
Yeah.
Classic crisis guidance that we give to clients is that there's only so much that you can control, and companies, good companies know that, and they don't bite off more than they can chew. But that's exactly, you can control your car and your passengers. That's what you can control, and that's your speed and whatnot. You can't really control what's around you, but what you can do is tap on the brakes and drift back into traffic and let those two clowns get out of your way. Or
Yeah, 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 that's for sure. Now, I want to go back to one thing, and I appreciate the way you avoided it, but not to pick on anybody in particular. But I think that it's an opportunity for leaders to observe a bad example, the wrong way to do it, and to think of the opposite and what could they have done instead. So, you look at how our government, and I think across the board, basically, has responded, and you mentioned could be better. And you really think about it, it really has been a lot of individual commentary and it's kind of an odd phrase, but knee-jerk reactions and things. And think about how it would have been different. I'm curious on your perspective here, because you're the expert. But I was having this conversation this morning. It's like, think how it would have been different if somebody had come out at a top level. I don't think Trump's capable of it, but Pence, who's a more level-headed guy who was put in charge of it, my understanding. Think if he had come out following what you're saying in the beginning, we're going to give you a daily update, or every 2 days, 3 days, whatever, and went through the facts each time, said we care. Think about how different that would be in our environment today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know?
What goes through people's minds, leaders, and we sit with leaders at this all the time, is that I don't want to be alarmist. It just might blow over. Maybe it'll blow over. And maybe let's say you're a company and you've got a regulatory problem and the regulators are looking at you and the media is kind of sniffing around. There's the potential, it's low, that could kind of blow over. All right. So I get that instinct of, well, I don't want to go out there and lay out this somber assessment because we just might get lucky. And I empathize and I sympathize with leaders like that. What I said earlier is about science and facts will lead your way. And again, I don't know enough about, immunology other than what I've listened to on the news outlets, but there's an arc, there's a curve, there's a trajectory. This is not one of those cases where, well, maybe you just got the sniffles and it'll blow over. That is a failing of situational awareness that any battlefield general will tell you is critical that you need to do. The same battlefield general would say, just because you hear one pop of gunfire, you don't call in an airstrike. It just and I get that there's sensitivity, but the reality of sensitivity is that when the meter is going crazy, you should kind of respond. And I think that's what we saw out of China, out of Europe, and now in the United States.
Yeah, and I saw one interesting commentary by someone who said that, who sounded like a level-headed guy. I forget who it was, where he said, in the next few weeks, you're going to see a serious increase in reported viruses in the U.S., possibly for no other reason than we're testing more now.
Mm-hmm.
And so just another thing to be prepared. But it's another data point that people could look for. So where I'm hearing that people need to communicate, you need to follow up, you need to be empathetic. Anything else that comes to mind here as advice for leaders during this time?
Yeah. Determine who matters most. And that's a simple little phrase and sounds kind of cheeky, but leaders should sit and say who matters most. Too often, everybody over indexes for the media, okay, because they call and everybody gets amped up about, oh my gosh, the New York Times is on the phone. That top, probably for most leaders that you're talking to, that we're talking to, that's not the problem. The problem is who matters most are their employees, their suppliers, their investors. So leaders need to figure out who matters most. And then I think most, quite frankly, are your employees. You got to keep them safe. You got to keep them coming back. You're going to have to deal with issues. So I think one of the things that clients, getting a little bit out of my lane, but we're being asked about it, is that we've now instituted this telework policy. We're sending everybody home to work from home for the next period of time. I'm guiding clients is that your messaging should say, and I expect you to come back in 20 days, because I think there's going to be a big push from the new teleworkers that are going to say, hey, David, this is awesome. Can we just stay here? We really love this. And as a leader, I'm this old Luddite that's like, no, come back to work because I need you here. And that's a messaging problem. So let's think about that now, that unintended consequences. So the other things is who matters most, really focus on your employees, and then the cascading implications of your HR policies, is really, really, really important. And the next one that we're talking to clients about is be ready if it gets worse. Be ready if there's a national shutdown. What we've seen in New Rochelle. And so imagine if you are a medium-sized law firm in New Rochelle, New York, and everything is shut down. Your team can't get there. You can't do filings. You can't get to your files. Think about the what ifs in that kind of context. I'm not predicting that's where we're going to go. But as you and I are taping and having this conversation, we just declared a national emergency. And states are following suit. And so thinking about, I'm okay, I've said something, I know who matters most, but what if it gets worse? What are we going to do from a business continuity standpoint, which has nothing to do with messaging and communications? What are we going to do if it gets worse?
Yeah, and I totally agree because you need to consider that. But my understanding, fortunately, U.S. economy was in pretty good shape going into it,
Mm-hmm.
but you're still looking at what the aftermath, the flow of this goes. You talked about cadence and communication. Well, if we have a number of employees, thousands of employees, some of them get to work remotely, but other people like Disneyland, Disney World, NBA, all those people are off work and many of them will not be paid.
Mm-hmm.
So, it might be a week or two they can handle that okay, maybe not, since a lot of people live paycheck to paycheck.
Right.
But what's going to be the implication? So it's not going to be like turning on a light bulb when this is over and everything pops back up.
Mm-hmm.
How can we be realistic and monitor this so we're taking the steps we need to take?
Yeah.
I'm
No,
kind of.
it's a good. Let me just add something. That's a
Go
really
ahead.
good point. But it's also in that sort of being prepared to return to normal, which is what you're talking about. Is that
Yeah.
this is gonna beginning, middle, and end. This is gonna have an end at some point. What can we do? How can we think creatively to make the world a better place? Make our companies, those that matter most, how can we make it better for them? And so I believe his name is Kevin Love. He's a basketball player with the Cleveland Cavaliers. He's donating $100,000 to the workers in the arena, the popcorn, beer, and hot dog guys, into a GoFundMe to help support them. Okay. Now that's a great reputational move for him personally. Organizations should be thinking, when I get out of this on the backside, what can we do? And I don't think that's exactly where you were going in that point, but that's what organizations can think about, is that backside of what can we do that's empathetic and understanding to make the world a better place for those that matter most to us.
Yeah, and what a great focus to have. And
Yes.
so, like, it occurs to me one thing a company can do right now, if things are slowing down a little bit for you, what are those bottlenecks? What are those broken processes that you have that you were fighting fires all the time? You were so busy you couldn't get to them.
Yes.
Well, hey, let's have people work on that now. So when we're coming out, we're seeing cost savings, we're seeing efficiency savings, as we come back and we're
Super
working.
smart. Super smart. And I think that's why people like you that are working with clients that can kind of be the lighthouse in the fog to sort of say, hey, if you remember your XYZ system was so broken and you said, I'm going to get to it in the summer. Well, now's a really awesome time in March to let's address that. Super cool. Smart idea.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just it's getting people to work together. And it also is an opportunity for you to take a hard look at the business.
Yeah.
Those different bottlenecks processes that we haven't gotten fixed. Maybe there's some employees that, were not producing as well as you thought. And you can make a decision. Well, do we use this time to really give them some training? Because a lot of times the issue is training. Or do we need to finally make the hard decision that, hey, it's not working out for either of us?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, that's a time that we make a change. Because another flip side is we've talked with clients, of course, it plays to where we work. is we teach a lot on hiring. I'm interviewing somebody today. We've got clients who are hiring right now. They're taking advantage of it. But as you've got some more people considering moves, it's all the more important you've got the right system in place to figure out who's really going to be a good fit versus who's really a good interviewer.
Yeah. Oh, so,
So
so true.
these
Yeah.
different processes you can work on. So what have we missed, Bill, that you think, is another consideration for people? I think we've covered a lot of great ground here.
Yeah, well, the thing we're talking about cadence, so thank you for bringing that up. We're in that. So two things. One, in that strategic framework of strategic, preventable, and external. The getting into this process and your initial communication is in response to a external threat. That's an external risk. This whole coronavirus thing is an external risk. It is a strategic risk when you decide to get back into business. Okay. And so one of the things we're doing with clients is that I have a hypothesis that there is not going to be a lifeguard blowing the whistle that says, hey, it's okay, everybody get back in the water. Those are going to be company by company, state by state, region by region decisions. The president is not going to say, come on, everything's okay. So companies are going to make strategic decisions. The financial impact of having all your stores or all your facilities closed or whatever for a period of time, the financial implication of that should be on the list of strategic considerations, but it should not drive the strategic consideration. It should be there,
Good
but
point.
it is about the safety. It's about what your peers are doing. What can I do that's in the best interest of those that we serve? So we will switch the risk. Right now is this external misunderstood virus. It's going to become a strategic decision of when do we get back in the water and when do we try to get back to normal. That gear shift from kind of neutral to first is going to be a very, very important decision for companies to make, and being very, very thoughtful. There's a way that we're recommending to kind of get there, but that's the next big piece. Getting in was easy. Keeping up the cadence pretty straightforward. Getting out is going to be the greater challenge for a lot of companies.
Yeah. Now I want to talk about that from a certain perspective, the getting in, getting out. So Bill, your company does something that's pretty unique. I mean, I don't run across people like you every day, and you're one of the sharpest people I've met. So I'm kind of curious, when an organization wants to make an investment in a person like you, like Kith and your team, talk to me about how, when they face one of these three types of challenges, they can be better prepared and have more of a smoother in and out of what they're going to go through, because they've structured a process where we're not going to blow things off. We're not going to panic. We've got a process on how we deal with these types of things, because I think that might be an important consideration for a lot of companies right now.
Yeah.
Because this is not the last crisis that's going to happen.
No.
This is an external one, but you mentioned the other two. So what can they do coming out of this to think, next time I'd like to be a little better prepared?
Yeah. So it's a terrific question, and it is really what we're passionate about. So we as a firm, we have been firefighters. We run when the bell rings, and that's what we do as a firm. Crisis response is kind of first and foremost what we do. But what we found over the years, and the new frontier for us as a firm, and I think this is the tip for the companies that you're talking about, is that you need to acknowledge that crisis is real. You know that crisis is real. And the way I've kind of equated it is to a transformation. It's similar to when we go see our cardiologist, and either we've had a heart attack, we know we've got a family history, or we just know that men of a certain age or women of a certain age become more susceptible to cardiac issues. And so whatever form that you take, there's this crisis. COVID has really explained that there's a crisis. The cardiologist is going to say probably one main thing. You need to change your diet and you need to exercise more, because that's what's going to make you resilient. And so what companies can do now is go on that diet and exercise journey. And what diet looks like is this construct of crisis readiness. It's the building blocks of messaging. It's the processes. It's the internal systems and procedures that we have in place. It's mission and values plus chain of command equals speed. It's all of those areas about being crisis ready. The exercise component is risk awareness. I've read a lot of crisis plans, and global pandemic is in a lot of crisis plans, but it's some sort of kind of Walking Dead type of global pandemic. It's not this slow moving train that looks a lot like the flu. And so it's there, and because some crisis planners saw The Walking Dead 10 years ago or 5 years ago, and it's there, but everybody kind of blows it off because it's kind of funny. But there is a risk awareness that organizations could do, particularly perception risk and risks around reputation, issue around the way the public perceive the company. And so much like a cardiologist, diet, exercise, getting you to resilience, the way that good companies need to respond post-COVID is crisis is real. We know it could happen. It's going to be this, that, or the other thing. Are we crisis ready? And then are we risk aware? Those two things, diet and exercise, will make companies more resilient. And my hope at the second half of my career is that people don't need me for crisis response because they're ready and they're aware of the issues that could impact their organization. So that's what organizations need to be thinking about now.
And that's what you help companies with, right?
Yeah, we spend a lot of time really on that transformation journey to create a resilient company.
Yeah, I think it's somewhat fascinating that I don't think it was part of our prior conversation, but if you think about it, there were a lot of us that thought stock market's really overpriced. Housing market hasn't been down a long time. It's due for a drop. And it's just fascinating whether you want to attribute it to nature, some religion, or your conspiracy theories, whatever it may be. Right. But it's just amazing how things kind of just happen where there's some balancing that occurs. Would you have picked it would happen exactly this way? I don't know anybody who did, but nope. Probably somebody will claim that they did. But I'm curious about one other aspect before I let you go, Bill, if it's okay. Just one more thing. So we've talked a lot about three types of crisis that are bad, and you need to be prepared for it because you're going to go through this transition. What about the flip side of it? How often do you get involved because things are going so good it seems like they're never going to end, and you get called in because there's somebody on the team who's worried, wait a minute, I think we're too Pollyanna or whatever example you want to use, where we're taking unnecessary risk because we think this is just never going to end and we're sloppy?
Incredibly rare. I can think of one organization and not even as pure as you're describing it. They knew from an adjacent industry that it could happen, and so things were going well for them. But gosh, this in the work that you do. You get these blinders on, and everything is hunky dory. And it's like being a teenager again. I can do no wrong. I'm invincible. And so, I'm sadly rare that someone has come to me in a state of positivity. Most people come to me in a state of mindfulness, concern, or panic.
Yeah. Interesting.
So, I think that's true for a lot of professionals. So I turn the question back to you, the folks you work with. How many folks come to you with a solution? They typically come to you with a problem or a challenge they need help with. I've got too much abundance, David. Help me sort of rationalize my abundance.
I do get some clients that are being successful and come and ask for advice on future direction. But like yourself, it's very rare. Yeah. Most of the time when they're having success, they think they got it nailed.
Totally.
And many times they do. I'm not taking away from
teenagers.
Many times, whether and then you can look at Blockbuster or AOL or whatever you want to look at. I remember, you may not remember this, and I don't remember the name of the company, but way back in the 80s, it was when, Compaq had the laptop that was like a sewing machine, And
Mhm.
it really wasn't. It was a portable computer. Excuse me. It wasn't a laptop because there's no way you fit that thing on a laptop. Yeah. And Osborne had the similar unit. And there was a company that came out with one of those types of units, did a stock offering. It was fantastic. The CEO who had most of the stock was now multimillionaire, went out and bought a Ferrari or whatever it was, and went for a drive in the beautiful hills of West Marin or whatever it was, and drove off a cliff. So it's everything's wonderful. So closing comments. Sorry for the rabbit trail.
Yeah.
Closing comments for the audience. I think a lot of great information here about who to think of first, how to communicate, have the cadence. Any last closing thing where you want to say, hey, if you're going to do anything, please make certain you're doing these things. Just to wrap up.
Yeah. Don't let a good crisis go to waste. I think you hit
I
all
agree.
I think you hit all the nails on the head. We prepared that tip sheet that we've shared with you. I think do those things. There's lots of enumerated tactical things. I think strategically leaders need to step back and say, okay, that sucked. What are we going to do about it next time so that we're better? And fix something small, fix your supply chain, fix those HR problems that you talked about earlier, fix your head of communications because they write a really good newsletter quarterly, but they're not really good, when the lights are on and the things are bright. So fix something big, fix something strategic, because the lumber guy in Des Moines, Iowa is not going to solve COVID. They can only solve what they can control, what they can manage. And so use this as an opportunity to solve something within your organizations. My thought is use it for reputation growth, but it really could be, just an operational challenge, and be reflective. We are very poor. We're not good reflectors in the United States, and we can all be better at reflecting on things.
Excellent. And we will, I'm sure, post your tip sheet that you put out for this. That's great. I also want to point out to the audience how humble Bill is, that you didn't hear him once ask for your business or anything. He's totally encouraging you to do what is right. But I want to encourage you that if you don't have a guy like this in your circle, look at his website, kith.co. Is that right, Bill?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, kith.co. See what resources they have. I mean, maybe you can't do a full engagement, but there's something there where there's things to learn from Bill's wisdom and what his team has done, and see what you can gain there and implement it just as he's saying. Thank you so much, Bill, for coming on. Really appreciate you squeezing this in.
David, thank you so much, and keep doing great stuff yourself. I appreciate those nice comments.